Welcome back to the Lights Out F1 podcast. Uh, Today we're missing both Jeremy and Claire. It's spring break at the college, so Claire's out having fun, and Jeremy, he might pop in. But you have me and Yakhub today.
What's
Um,
up?
and tomorrow we're at our first free practice in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, sir.
Yep. I think it's the second newest street circuit behind Miami, if you really want to count Miami as a street circuit.
Yep.
Um, So let's just start off with a fun fact that you're gonna hate. This is the last time that Lewis Hamilton won a race.
No, isn't Brazil the last time you won a race?
Was Saudi Arabia after or before Brazil?
I'm pretty sure it was.
I'm pretty sure it was after.
Oh yeah, it was
Yeah,
after.
they dropped a quiz on the F1 app. Um, they're like, true or false, is this the last time that Lewis Hamilton won a race? The last time Lewis Hamilton won a race is Saudi Arabia 2021.
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
so it's a, a bit of an alarming fun fact, and I don't think it's a very fun fact for you.
No, it's not.
Um, but also last year, I think both times we've had the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, as we've only had it for 2 years, um, we've had really close fights at the front. The first time was between Max and Lewis, and we all know what happened there with the whole no one knew what was going on thing. Max
Yeah.
apparently brake checking Lewis, and Lewis really wanting another slipstream. Um, and then the second time last year, we had Charles and Max fighting for DRS the entire race and finishing the race. And I think the closest margin all of last year with a .549 second gap between them. Um,
Yeah.
DRS clearly a big thing on this track. I mean, and I
Yeah.
think this new generation of cars. Would you agree with? I want to say it was either Karoom or Ted Kravitz that said that DRS in this new generation of cars is too strong.
I don't know if it's too strong. I think we've needed DRS
Mhm.
for a while now because otherwise you're just not seeing too much overtaking. The DRS helps the overtaking. I think for this year's race in Saudi Arabia, they've moved the sensors, the DRS
Yeah.
sensor points, especially at the corner where they're constantly like fighting over braking early to try and get the DRS detection. I don't know if it's too strong. I think F1's ultimate aim eventually is to move away from DRS and progress to natural overtaking as opposed to using DRS constantly. So I
Yeah.
don't think it's too strong. I think in certain tracks, maybe the length of the straight is a little too much.
Hmm.
Like for example, I think in
Like a Monza
for
or
Brazil,
Mexico.
take Brazil for example,
Okay.
that main straight it might be a little too long because you just pull up right behind like 2021 Brazil. Like he Hamilton, all of his overtakes were all pretty much there, with the exception of the one on Max.
Yeah.
So I think maybe for certain tracks, shorten it a little bit,
Hmm.
shorten the DRS availability in certain tracks. But other than that, I think until you can transition
Yeah.
to a natural overtaking type thing, I think DRS is
Yeah.
perfectly fine.
I mean, I feel like with DRS, it's like, yeah, it's really strong. I think in these cars, though, it's necessary. It is easy to follow in these cars, which is something they were going for.
Yeah,
And previously, DRS wasn't as useful because in the 2014 to 2021 cars, like everybody knew it was super hard to get in that 1 second zone because your tires would start shredding up once you get within like 3 seconds behind them. Um, and I mean, it's most apparent every single time you see any time when Lewis and Max would go at it. Like whoever was behind would always complain, like, "Hey, dude, it's so hard to follow."
yeah,
um, but yeah, so DRS clearly really strong. I'm not sure. I feel like if the day ever comes when it becomes like natural overtaking down a straight, where it's just like really fast through like a slipstream, or I feel like it'd have to be almost entirely like overtaking the middle of corners, which is a very high skilled maneuver for most people. Because
yeah,
nowadays, like you see somebody go up the outside of a corner, or like Fernando Alonso, I guess, like down the inside of a turn 10. Like those are spectacular overtakes, and like everybody's looking for
yeah.
those. Um, but yeah, I do agree it should be something. I think we do need it for now. Um,
Yeah,
this track is very different compared to Bahrain. The temps aren't as high. The downforce isn't as heavy here, just because the corners aren't as tight. It's a lot looser on the corners, save for our two hairpins. Um, What cars do you think are going to excel here, comparatively speaking, to Bahrain?
Well, I think the Red Bull league of its own, it's gonna. I think it's a domination by Red Bull unless they get it like spectacularly wrong.
Hmm.
But I think Red Bull is gonna Red Bull. I think you're gonna see. Well, I mean, well, Ferrari with its 10th place. Hopefully, Carlos Sainz put up somewhat of a competition to Max and Checo. Um, and I think between the McLaren, not the McLaren, the Mercedes and the Aston Martin, I think I don't know honestly, because I think Bahrain's the outlier because it's super heavy on its super difficult on the rear tires, and the Mercedes
Yes.
just didn't have the rear to to compete. So I think with the type of I think it's tarmac now for the
Yeah.
for Saudi Arabia. So I think we'll see. I think if you're gonna if you're gonna take Bahrain as a measurement stick, I think Aston Martin have the advantage. But
Yep.
I'm excited to see what because I think Mercedes have some floor upgrades they're bringing in for this race. So I'm excited to
Hmm.
see what Mercedes how what they're able to pull out for this particular race.
Yeah. So jumping back to Red Bull real quick, Checo last year got pole. And I think this year he's probably going to put up another really good contest for pole with Max just because it seems like he's very confident on street circuits. Like, I mean, I think all four of his wins at Red Bull have been at a street circuit with Azerbaijan, Monaco, Singapore. I think actually it's only 3 wins at Red Bull, and then he has the 1 win in Bahrain when he was at Racing Point.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, all of his 3 of his 4 wins are street circuits when he's at Red Bull. So, do you think he's going to be more competitive with Max at this race compared to a Bahrain?
Uh, Possibly. I mean, he had pole, and then the win was obviously sort of taken away from him last season. But he
Mm.
had pole last season, so and I think Max isn't doing so well health wise,
Yeah,
or has something's wrong with
yeah, he'll be
him.
coming in a bit late. So,
So uh, I think all of those factors could create a perfect storm for Checo to
mm.
possibly take pole and then the win.
Yeah,
But I don't think I think it'll be a hard fought pull and a hard fought win if he does manage to get both.
hmm. On the topic of Ferrari, obviously we know Charles has that 10th place grid penalty. I don't think it's going to be as easy for him to come through the field this year as it was last year. A lot of the cars are a lot closer as far as like speeds.
Yeah.
And I think like having to overtake the likes of Williams and Alpine. I mean, this track specializes in straight line speed, which are two things that those cars are very good at. And also trying to overtake like even the Alfa Romeos or getting in the top. I think probably getting in the top 8 is going to be like one of the most difficult things. I can see him
Oh,
easily getting into the top 10, like maybe ninth, but like after that, I think every single place is going to be super hard fought.
I think he's got to hope that I think he's got to hope that he gets into Q3 and
Yes.
gets at least onto the front row,
Yeah.
and then hopefully he gets relegated down. He'll probably get relegated down to 11th or 12th.
Yeah.
So,
I think
but
I don't think
it's
front
going to
row
be
is
a hard.
attainable. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, he's got hope. He's just got to hope that he can get it like somehow, because otherwise it's going to be it's going to be a long race for him. Because
Yeah.
I remember back in Canada last year, Montreal 2022, he was coming from the back of the field and was just not making as much progress as you'd think he'd make
Hmm.
in that car. And now that the car is even I think it's there's a little bit of a step back it seems to have taken compared to the Red Bull.
Hmm.
I think he's gonna have a long race ahead of him, and he better be praying every lap that something doesn't fail.
Yeah. Another thing I was thinking he was probably gonna be hoping for is safety car, virtual safety cars, anything to like help him get closer to the rest of the field whenever
Oh
a
yeah,
mistake
no, but
happens.
I mean,
One
yeah, I
thing
think
I'm
that's
interested
a
in. Yeah, keep going.
yeah,
Sorry.
that's a high probability at this track. We've had
Yeah.
three safety cars at this track, a couple of red flags.
Yeah. So,
So
let's see. 2021 we had one actual safety car, and then 2022 we had one. So, and then we had 3 virtual safety cars in 2021. Albeit it was the
yeah,
first year of the track, but they did modify the track. So I think 7 of the like 24 corners there are now much wider and have rumble strips on them, so that way people know that they're getting really close to the wall.
Yeah.
um, but they're trying to use it as a safety precaution because obviously you have I don't really want to count the 2021 safety car because Nikita Maj has been literally just trying to force his way through George Russell since he couldn't get past him. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, outside of that, I feel like this is a track where people in qualifying they're a lot more aggressive because you're really trying
Yeah.
to push the limit. But I think during the race, people are much more like I don't want to say cordial, but nice to each other because nobody wants to be in the
I
wall.
I disagree with that. I think Esteban Ocon would disagree with you
Oh
on
yeah, hundred
that as
percent.
well. And Max Verstappen, for that matter. Last year he didn't put up much of a fight, but 2021 he was aggressive as hell for
Oh
himself.
yeah. Um, let's see. On the topic of Aston Martin and Alonso, um, I can see him putting the car pretty high. I don't. So I think the car looks good in Bahrain. I don't think it's just going to majestically fall off, but I can see it fighting all three of the top three teams, or I guess the other top four teams now at this point, because I don't think the weakness of the Mercedes is going to be nearly as drastic as it was in Bahrain.
Yeah.
I don't think he's touching the Red Bulls. I don't think anyone is, but I can definitely see the Ferraris and Mercedes being a lot more competitive when it comes to qualifying and even in race. But off Alonso, because we all know that he's gonna put up something stellar again. Lance Stroll is still injured, but he's apparently doing a lot better than he was during Bahrain. And he'll have full time in Saudi Arabia with somewhat healed wrists and not so broken toe. Um, and he won't have to be learning the track during the race. Um,
Yeah.
but like for of all people, I think Stroll is the one person I'm probably expecting to get into an accident. And it's
I'm
nothing
like,
against him, but it's just like he has broken hands and it's a very aggressive
yeah,
track.
I'd say either Stroll or Logan Sargent. I think one of those two would probably more
Yeah, either them
more
or
likely.
like one of the rookies.
Yeah, Logan Sargent, Nick possibly, Nick DeVries possibly.
I think Nick is the
Um,
lowest risk one out of all of them, just because
yeah, but I
he's
think
very used
yeah,
to tight corners on circuits since he drove in Formula E.
yeah. So I think I mean honestly, I think it's either Lance Stroll or Logan Sargent. I'd have
Mm-hmm.
more money on Lance Stroll simply because of he's got those physical issues to deal with.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean I don't know how Lance Stroll is gonna go. I think Fernando's gonna beat him.
Yep.
It's just a question of can Stroll then compete with the likes of Ferrari and Mercedes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he clearly did it last
And
time. So with George.
yeah, yeah, he split the Mercedes last race. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but I think obviously Bahrain being the outlier,
Yeah.
George didn't really put up much of a fight. He sort of knew what was coming.
Yep.
But I'm excited to see how the wheel-to-wheel racing goes between the
Mm-hmm.
three, even Fernando, like before between the two Astons and the Mercedes.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see how Lewis and Fernando have evolved
Mm-hmm.
their wheel-to-wheel fighting since 2008. Since we haven't actually seen them legitimately race each other in a while.
Yeah. Um, so outside of that, McLaren are bringing a small update. They're planning on bringing three small updates and then the large one. I think it's two small updates and then the large one comes in Azerbaijan. Um, I'm not expecting too much from it. Like it's not going to be like something crazy fast, but hopefully it's something to fix their technical issues.
Oh, one would hope. I mean, you know,
Anything
let's
to not
let's hope.
DNF.
Exactly. Like, anything to not like finish like DNF and finish out of the top 10.
Yeah.
Because to me, it just seems like they've gone backwards. Like
Mhm.
over the last 2 years, they've just gone like at least in 2021 they were bagging
Oh
wins
yeah.
and a couple podiums, a couple here and there. So since then, it's just been like
They got the
it's just
regulation change
been
wrong. Like
yeah,
100%.
and like yeah, and the whole I don't think the 15 millimeter floor change I'm sure it didn't help them.
No,
I
not
think
at all.
James Key admitted that it didn't help them at all. They weren't
No.
prepared for it. So
Um,
one would hope that they're improving as opposed to going backwards.
but also Lando said amongst all the rumors because we've all talked about uh, where do you see him moving if he moves? He openly stated like he's not planning on going anywhere anytime soon, and he
Yeah,
doesn't see McLaren as moving backwards. which is kind of weird because literally everything points to the exact opposite.
Yeah,
I watched a couple videos, and a lot of people like put like there's the number one team, which is Red Bull, and there's an 8 car midfield, which is every other car, and then the team at the last part of the grid is McLaren, and both
yeah,
of them said that, and I was like, that seems pretty accurate because McLaren are the only team with 2 cars that basically didn't finish. Um,
yeah.
and I mean, you could say Alpine had a non-finisher, but it's really because time penalties. Um, but I don't know. I don't know what he sees in the team. Maybe he's also just like the engineers and the team principal and like everybody else, and he's just like waiting for the new wind tunnel. But I think he's praying that 2024 is a good year because this year's a wrap.
No, no, I mean, this year is competing for hope. I thought they'd compete for P4. Now
Yeah.
it's like, can you stay in the top five?
Yeah.
Um,
I can
I don't know. I
honestly see
think.
them like being in the bottom three.
Oh no, 100%. I could see
Yeah.
them finishing outside of the top five for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I mean, between him and Lewis, I think they've both denied that they're not going to go anywhere. But
Yes.
that's what every driver is going to tell you when they're in the middle of a contract. At least in the case of Lando, he can't go anywhere for the
Yeah.
next couple of years
Nobody can
because
pay for him.
he's contractually obligated, whereas
Lewis is a
Lewis
different
could potentially.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they're both. Yeah, we'll see.
Yep. Um, where was I? So outside of that, Alfa Romeo, I feel like is gonna be a dark horse here.
Yeah,
They showed some teeth in Bahrain, but I think here, where their car upgrades, I feel like their car upgrades are much more tailored toward a track like this. Probably towards street circuits in general, which is kind of weird to say that a car could be tailored towards them, but it feels like something that the Alfa Romeo excels at. I think a lot of their points last year came from either street circuits or um, Bahrain. I mean, obviously that's a big one, but I
yeah.
feel like the Alfa Romeo just does better on them. And maybe the changes this year to make it so they can transfer their performance from street circuits to other circuits. But I can see Joe and Bottas seriously contesting for points here.
Yeah, I think they could. I think they need to have a really good Saturday. I
Mm-hmm.
think they need to at least qualify. I think I would hope that uh, Bottas qualifies in gets into Q3.
Mm-hmm.
I think Joe minimum is to finish in the top 15,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can have a good Sunday. Because if they don't have a good Saturday, then like Sunday is going to be a little more difficult. They'll make it more difficult on themselves.
Yep.
But I think the car will. I think the car looked pretty good in Bahrain. So I think
Yep.
sure it didn't. I don't. Did they both finish in the points? I don't think
Just
they both.
Bottas. I think Joe finished 12 or 13.
Yeah. So I think a good points haul is on the cards for them this on Sunday, and so just have a good Saturday. That's all they need.
Yeah.
Just have a good Saturday.
I can see Joe
And
qualifying like P12 or something.
yeah, I would see. I could see. I can see Bottas getting into Q3, finishing like P8, P9,
Mm-hmm.
and Joe a couple places below him, and then you just need to be able to um, get out of the carnage of the first corner, and then you're good.
Yes.
Because I think the rest of the grid will sort of take care of themselves,
Yes.
if you get what I mean. I think that Alpine will have a big inner fight, but we'll see about that.
Mm-hmm. Um, One team I'm really interested in, and maybe it's just because Bahrain might have set them apart a little bit because we were expecting a lot less, but Williams. Um, we know they're good in a straight line, and I don't think they've lost that at all. Yuki was following Alex for lap upon lap in a straight line and couldn't get past him. But I think Williams could be also a really big dark horse here. Albon could have put the Williams into Q3 in the first race of the season. And I'm 100% certain of that because his lap was going really well until he had that spinner in the middle of it. So I'm kind of curious to see if he'll carry that performance into Saudi Arabia, maybe putting it like, a P10, maybe a P9 like Bottas. And I'm also curious to see where Sargent ends up because, I mean, he showed he has qualifying pace. That's something that he showed in F2 as well. But his qualifying pace is nuts. And he qualified the same time as Lando, but just one place behind. He did it after him. So I'm kind of curious to see if he'll put it into Q2 or not.
Uh, Q2 would be the minimum for Alex and I think Logan Sargent. I think Bahrain sort of. I think they've improved. They've definitely taken a step up, is
Yes.
what I would say. They've definitely made a forward step. Whether they can keep that momentum going throughout the season is like an entirely different question.
Mhm.
So I mean, I think at least be able to compete for P10, P9 on Sunday for Williams would be a
Mhm.
good starting point, a good start to the season.
Yeah.
2 weekends competing for point. I mean, 1 point, but like points nonetheless
Yeah.
is still a good start for the season. You're still like ahead of McLaren in that sense. So
Yeah, we could see Alex Albon do the same thing as Lance Stroll last year and just take like 7 or 8 P10s home.
yeah,
I mean, that'd be better than what he was doing last year. Um, but I think Logan Sargent was the one who got 12th place in Bahrain, right behind Yuki, and then I think Joe actually got like 14 or 15. Um, I don't think we have really much to talk about when it comes to AlphaTauri. It's AlphaTauri, and we're not sure what they're doing. Um, yeah, and so AlphaTauri confuses me. This isn't even, like related to the race anymore for them. It's like they confuse me because they get a lot of parts from Red Bull, but they want to operate independently outside of like the parts that they get, which is kind of wild because everybody's like, well, everybody, but a lot of people are wondering like, why isn't AlphaTauri, just as fast as the Red Bulls if they're essentially like the child team of Red Bull, and it's primarily
yeah.
because they don't actually use Red Bull parts when they have the open opportunity to.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's an ego thing. At least I think for them it's an ego thing. I think for Franz Tost it's like I think it's like no, we can build our own car. We're not
Yeah.
just Red Bull's sister team. I
Hmm.
mean, so
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing. Honestly, if I were them, I'd be taking all the parts that Red Bull I was allowed to take from Red Bull and sticking it on that car and seeing what happens.
You're like, hey, this car works now. Surprise.
Yeah, they've basically gone backwards over the last couple of years. So
Yeah.
they used to be a solid midfield team
Yeah.
from like
I mean,
2018 to like 2021. They were a solid mid 2021 maybe not, but
yeah.
2018 actually 2021 as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were a solid midfield team, and now they're just like back of the pack.
Yeah.
They're the new Williams. They're the new Williams.
Yeah. I mean, Williams were still back in the pack, but yeah, I don't know. AlphaTauri, it's really hard to see where they're going. I mean, a lot of cars on the grid, we can see that they have a direction that they're going in. Like Alpine, they built theirs for straight line speed, and they definitely have straight line speed. Mercedes were better at downforce last year. That's something that they're lacking this year. They'll fix it. Red Bull are the best in every category. Um, and I mean, Williams built their own identity as well. But it seems like AlphaTauri is a team that didn't upgrade very much, or if they did, they
Yeah,
just didn't create an identity. Um,
yeah,
and I think McLaren's in the same boat. Their car has no identity. Um, Kind of weird thing, but I feel like the Alfa Romeo, like it's not at all related to Red Bull, but I feel like it's probably the most like average car on the grid. Like always P6, P5 potential in constructors, but like never higher than that. It is like the
yeah.
benchmark to hit. And I think Valtteri Bottas is like the perfect benchmark for the rest of the midfield. Like if you
Oh
can
yeah,
beat
100%.
Bottas in that Alfa Romeo, I feel like it's proven that you're moving above the midfield.
Yeah.
Um, but Alpine, also very good in straight line. We have two very good drivers. Pierre Gasly with a great drive. Hopefully, Esteban Ocon doesn't get as many penalties as last time. But what do you see them doing this time?
I think they're competing for they're competing for the top best of the rest. I think hopefully,
Yep, like a P5.
obviously the car, yeah, P5, P6, somewhere in that.
Mm.
I think actually less than P5, probably P6 to P8, hopefully.
Oh, who do you think would be
Um,
P5?
I think you've got the Mercedes on. Oh, for in terms of
Yeah,
the constructor
constructors. Yeah,
standings. I meant for the race,
yeah.
but yeah. So obviously in the race they're competing for somewhere in the top 10. Hopefully
Mm-hmm.
the lower, ideally the lower half of the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
But I think um, it's gonna be an interesting Sunday and an interesting Saturday because if both of them can have good Saturdays,
Yeah,
you could potentially see what a Pierre Gasly Esteban Ocon wheel to wheel fight looks like.
yeah. You think it'll be much
Esteban,
more similar to like Esteban Ocon versus Fernando Alonso, or do you think
Oh,
okay?
yeah, I think it's gonna. I think it'll be that, but just a little less because I don't think Pierre Gasly is as talented as Fernando Alonso.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's gonna be sort of Esteban Ocon being really aggressive, Pierre Gasly having to sort of gauge what's going on and stuff. But I think it'll be an interesting wheel to wheel fight because I think it'll be hopefully it'll be the first time we see these two as teammates going at it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I think Pierre Gasly, and maybe it's because of how good of a race he had, but I think for now I'm gonna say he's probably a bit faster than Ocon in the car. Um, I don't think it's because he necessarily knows the car better. I just think it's because he has the hunger to do well in the car that he just got, and it's finally his time to show what he can do now that he's not at Red Bull anymore. Um, his driving Bahrain is just straight up stellar. If it wasn't for Fernando Alonso and him pulling out the stops for Aston Martin, I like Pierre Gasly is 100% driver of the day. So I think in Saudi Arabia with the car that they have underneath him, I'm gonna say he's probably gonna be in the top, let's say P8 after qualifying. I don't know who goes behind him out of the big four, but I can see an Alpine being up there. Um, who am I missing? Where do you? Okay, we already talked about them. I think we talked about everybody. No, I mean
Oh, we didn't talk about the top three, right? We didn't even talk about Mercedes Red Bull.
Red Bull wasn't really much to
Well,
talk
for
about. They'll be on the front row. So
yeah, I don't think we did. I don't think we did Mercedes that. Well, we did a little bit, but
yeah, um,
yeah, I think it's gonna be a long weekend for Mercedes. I think
it'll tell a lot.
uh, it'll. I think because I've been reading a lot and I watched a couple of YouTube videos
Yep.
today, and I think over the next couple of races, maybe not the next 2 or 3 races, but towards maybe 4 races, 4, 5, and 6. Um, I think we're going to see big changes to Mercedes because I think both Lewis and George both said in their respective press conferences, big decisions have been taken,
Yeah.
and there's going to be a change to what the car look. I don't know if it's good what the car looks like, but big decisions have been taken regarding the car and the philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to see what they go down with. Is it like sort of are they just going to copy either Red Bull or Ferrari, or is it going to be something uh new that they've come up with that let's pray to God that works, but we'll see.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, clearly what they have right now isn't working. I mean,
Yeah, I think they've
I
reached
don't
the
think they're just
potential.
gonna throw. You can't just throw a Red Bull side pod on there, just because
No.
Red Bull is one of the few teams that runs the opposite suspension configuration from everybody else, where
Yeah.
they run a pull rod in the front, push rod in the back, and everybody usually most teams run the opposite. Um, and obviously that means Red Bull clearly has something that they like to work on there. Adrian Newey is, I mean, he's made the car even better somehow than it was last year. Um, but yeah, not Red Bull, Mercedes have a lot to work on with the car. Um, I don't want to say that it's the entire engineering and mechanical side of things, but I mean it is. It's just
I I don't know. I think personally, I think uh how you let for me, like I think it's just like they've shown a bit of overconfidence over the last 2 seasons
yep.
to me in that no, we're gonna stick with our concept. We're gonna let Mike Elliott do his thing.
Mm-hmm.
How you let like James Allison, like who basically built your dominant cars, go and work on boats for like a for off in 2021, and then it's like I don't know. I think it's a bit of arrogance and a bit of technical ego. Like we've built championship cars, we know how to build championship cars. So I think I mean I would hope there's something big is gonna have to change because this is clearly not working. I think they've reached the potential of the zero pod thing because like last season they were saying I think at the beginning of testing they were saying that they had the performance that they think the zero pod design could bring was like a second and a half,
Yep.
and that sort of got thrown away because of the porpoising. And now that they've gotten rid of the porpoising, they've sort of caught up that second and a half, but the rest of the grid has gone up, has sort of also advanced in terms of performance. So I think they've reached the potential of the zero pod design. I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Um,
Um,
it's interesting to me. It's so I think I wouldn't say they've reached the potential of it, but I do think that having the floor raised uh, did stunt it drastically because I feel like the way that they were maximizing how good the zero pod design was when it was able to run at one of its lowest configurations. Um, that car had immense downforce compared to the rest of the grid last year, which I mean hurt it at some points, helped it at a lot of others. I mean, Brazil is the clearest one to say they were able to run it super low to the ground compared to everybody else, and they were super quick. But you can't run it low to the ground if you're damaging your drivers. I think that they can probably find a few more tenths out of it, like maybe two or three, but I don't think they'll find enough to catch Red Bull. I don't think anyone's finding enough to catch Red Bull really. Um,
No,
yeah,
this season for Mercedes is wrap is a wrap. I think
yeah,
it's like competing. It's like not losing positions to Aston Martin and
yeah,
hopefully competing for P2 in the championship.
yeah. It's
I
kind of
think 20.
interesting. Three teams competing for P2 instead of two, and I think it's gonna be a lot closer this year than it was last year. Because last
Oh
year it was
no,
like Ferrari, kind of looking like they're gonna drive away with it, and then falling off in the latter half, reverse
yeah,
Mercedes, and then this year it could be just all three of them just duking it out like full on for P2. And right now Aston Martin's holding that pretty tight.
yeah. I think unless both Ferrari and Mercedes get their act together in
Mm,
terms of for Ferrari reliability and strategy, and Mercedes it's like get a faster car and develop the hell out of it.
yeah,
Aston Martin are looking pretty solid for P2 right now. I think one race in, we might be hyping them up a little too much. I
yeah,
think maybe after Melbourne or the fourth race, we can then solidify and say, okay, yeah, they're solidly in P2. But
mm,
I think it's going to be a big fight for P2. I don't see Red Bull really falling off unless like the whole CFD and aero penalty, the wind tunnel penalty kicks in, and they
mm,
really just sort of like something disastrous happens. I think P2 is up for grabs for three teams right now.
yep. And then so I guess the way we can kind of separate it now is rather than last year where it was like a 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, it's just like Red Bull. I mean, I think most people would probably agree with George Russell when they say Red Bull's got the title in a wrap this year. I
Oh no,
don't
hundred
think
percent,
anyone's catching
hundred
them.
percent.
But now we have three people for P2. We have five people for P5. And then, not to be mean to them, but McLaren not looking like they're going above P10 right now.
Yeah. You, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, kind of, yeah. Like unless like this Azerbaijan grade kicks in and
Hmm.
like sort of like just pole vaults them above Haas, Williams, Alfa Romeo, Alpine, or
Hmm.
at least gets them into that sort of P5, P4 to P6 pack
Yeah.
in the constructors. They're looking like they're competing with like AlphaTauri for last and second last.
Yeah. Forgot to talk about Haas. That team was overwhelmingly underwhelming. And I mean, like,
Oh yeah,
in the worst way. Uh, yeah, Nico Hulkenberg had his crash, but also I think we were expecting way too much at the start of the year for them. Um, yes, they're gonna be using a lot more money this year. They'll be able to upgrade a lot more, but it's not like they're gonna have it all instantly. And I feel like Nico Hulkenberg maybe got everybody a little too hyped by putting that car in Q3. Um,
yeah.
I don't see them competing as much as we thought they would. Maybe in the latter half of the year, sure, but during this early part of the year, they showed one lap pace, but their race pace isn't really there compared to Alpine, Williams, Alfa Romeo.
Yeah, I think you'll see them towards the end of the season
Hmm.
sort of compete in the midfield, sort
Hmm.
of for P5, P6, P4 maybe. Um, but I think for them it's going to be incremental because they need to develop that car and sort of get Hulkenberg uh, acclimated with the team and acclimated with the car itself because he's
Hmm.
only ever driven. He's not driven in a while, so I think they'll get there. I think first couple races will be a bit underwhelming for them. Will be a little bit of a there might not be points, but there'll be points I think, but like less points than you would expect them to score.
Yeah.
Um, but I think they'll get there. I think they will. I think eventually, once they've developed and towards the end of the season, they'll get there eventually.
Hmm. Do you think that they'll have as many points this year as they had last year?
How many did they
They
have
had
last year?
27 last year.
Where did they finish? P6, P7?
P8.
I think they'll score a lot more than that.
Really?
Yeah, I can see them doing it. I think between Magnussen and Hulkenberg, they're both really solid point getter drivers. I
Yeah.
think you, and I think you, I think they're also competing with like rookies for the most part. Like compared to their
Yeah.
ages, they're competing with rookies. They're competing with Albon, Sargent, Joe.
I wouldn't really
Um,
call Albon a rookie anymore.
yeah, I mean, yeah, fair. Okay, so Sargent, Joe, Nick DeVries to an extent. Um, I think I rate both of them higher than Yuki. Um,
I think
and
right now I think I classify Hulkenberg as like a rookie for the car because
yeah, for
the
the
last
car,
time he had a full race seat, it was in a previous regulation period.
true, but he's also driven these cars. Like he
I mean, yeah,
drove the Aston.
he drove two races for them last year because Seb I think
Yeah,
had COVID, but I mean so is Nick DeVries also drove the cars, so it's not like I feel like if we're saying obviously Nick DeVries is a rookie, I feel like Hulkenberg with the new era of cars is a rookie, and I think he's most comparable to the rookies.
yeah. Well, like I think the thing that separates him is his experience.
Yeah,
His experience with wheel-to-wheel racing, his experience with sort of managing an entire race and managing a sort of a season-long
yeah,
competition. So I think that's where he has an advantage. But I think they score a lot more. I think personally, I would be worried for all of the Ferrari customer engine cars that are
yes,
using Ferrari engines. I would be very worried if I were them.
yeah. Um, so back to James Allison, the man who's working on boats.
The
This was one
goat.
of the things that I kind of brought up last week with the idea of teams sending out their top staff to work on other projects, albeit James Allison was fully working in another project. Um, if there's one thing that boats need for speed, it's aerodynamics.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that strategically speaking, while it may seem like Mercedes are bringing in James Allison to fix the car, I think the other way you can flip it around, rather than saying that Mike Elliott is it Mike Mark?
Mike Elliott.
Okay,
Mike
Mike
Elliott.
Elliott. Instead of saying he got it wrong, maybe they're bringing in James Allison, saying maybe Mike Elliott has it somewhat right, and then James Allison brings in this other half that he might
No,
have been missing.
yeah, potentially. I
Mm.
mean, potentially, like Mike Elliott could have gotten it right, and now James Allison is sort of supervising or providing input, and I think he's supervising future updates for the car.
Yep.
And I think, I mean, I don't see Mercedes switching to Red Bull or Ferrari. I think Mike Elliott and I think has been pretty clear about um, the big upgrade. I think that's coming to Imola. I think
Mm.
he's been pretty clear that it's not going to be like everybody else's. It's going to be sort of unique to them.
Yep.
So, I'm pretty sure, like from what I've been reading and watching, James Allison is going to have more input on the upgrades and the Imola upgrade especially.
Mm.
So he could have gotten it right. I'm not saying he
Yeah.
didn't get it right. I'm just saying it just seems to me like they haven't got it right. Like if
Mm.
you on paper on and the results,
Yeah.
like as Toto Wolff is famous for saying, the stopwatch doesn't lie,
Yeah.
right? And you've got a car that isn't finishing ahead of everybody else. So
Yeah.
potentially, like they've got something in the bag that they haven't. They've that James Allison is going to help them bring to the car and develop. But um, I just until that happens,
Yeah.
to me, Mike Elliott got it. Until it happens, Mike Elliott got it. In my opinion.
Mm. Um, so a lot of people with the Mercedes car are blaming the side pods just because it is an easy thing to target because it's like the biggest difference between most of the other, actually the entire grid versus Mercedes. Um, I think one of the interesting things is that a lot of the problems that sprouted for Mercedes weren't actually from the side pods. It
Yeah.
primarily comes from their suspension setup and their floor. And so what I'm interested with is now that their um, suspension isn't a problem, they're not bouncing anymore. I think one of the things that they have to start focusing on is floor. And I think that's something that maybe Mike Elliott doesn't specialize in. And I think that might be the thing that James Elliott comes in to fix because, like Red Bull, obviously we can see their primary focus was a slightly larger inlet in the side pod, and then a much more aerodynamically efficient floor. I mean, a lot of people thought they were cheating with that floor, and it's really just smart. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that Mercedes have almost everything right on the car. The only problem is that they don't have downforce, and that's something that can be attributed to your wings and your floor. And I think those are things that James Allison is probably better at, given the fact that he spent a lot of time working on the wings for the previous Mercedes models.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is a lot of people don't share your view on the whole concept of the side pods is not a big factor because I was watching a couple videos and I was also watching the I think the Sky Sports F1 podcast
Yep, I was watching it today.
with yeah, and I think it was with Martin Brundle and uh, I don't know who the other Jess McFadden I think,
And then there's yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah, so she's relatively new,
yes, she is.
but and I think it was Brundle who said like if you know when you look at a car like visually you look at a car like you look at the Red Bull and it looks smooth, it looks like a good car visually, it looks appealing to your eyes and it looks like a good car.
Hmm.
You look at the Ferrari, it's somewhat appealing, it looks like a good car, but and then he made it a point of looking like he said you look at the Mercedes with the zero pod design,
Hmm.
and he said it looked. I'm pretty sure it might have been
Clunky.
him. I could be wrong. It looks clunky,
Yes.
and he said if it doesn't look good, it's not gonna. He, in his opinion, it's not gonna be a good car.
Hmm.
And so I was also watching like another one. I don't remember what it was. I think it was the Last Lap podcast. Those two guys, and there was another guy on the podcast, and he was talking about how like in this era where we have no like barge boards, like
Hmm.
the whole like the previous era there was like barge boards and everything else to generate
Yeah.
downforce. All these side pods are, whether you like it or not, side pods are going to contribute towards downforce and outwash and all of that.
Yeah.
And he was saying that I think he said one of the guests on that podcast was saying that I think we're underestimating how much the side pods actually matter when it comes to downforce and when it comes to speed of a car.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's actually underestimating it, just because obviously everybody's saying that Mercedes sucks because of it. So I think everybody's kind of over. In my opinion, people are overestimating the effect that the side pods are having. Obviously, it could be
Yeah.
having a much larger effect. I mean, their side pods are substantially larger than they were last year. I do agree with Martin Brundle when he says that it's a lot clunkier. It is. Um, Last year's car was a lot smoother. Uh, and I feel like the floor raise, along with the changes to the visual of the car, definitely make it look more clunky. But the
Yeah.
car's more stable, and I mean, I think we can all agree that it's much better to watch a clunky, stable Mercedes than a smooth, super bouncy one that's damaging the drivers. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's a very large mix of, maybe the side pod concept isn't terrible, but it's not the best either. I think it's a combination of just the entire car, because I think Mercedes also is one of the few teams that maximizes the width of the car. And I think a lot of people find it hard to see just because the cars are very close in width size. But if you compare the Mercedes looking straight at it to the Alpine, which is the most narrow car, there is a vast difference. Like, I think you can see almost the entire right tire or left tire, whichever way you're looking at it. If you put them like against a wall, you can see the entire tire of a Mercedes sticking out. And I think that was
Yeah.
most apparent when we were watching in Suzuka, because Esteban Ocon holding off Lewis Hamilton, and you could see like how wide the Mercedes looked compared to it.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. Mercedes is a very always going to be a very interesting topic to talk about now that they don't have a billion engineers working for them, and they can't just change the entire car. I mean, they could, but their cap
Yeah.
would go down the drain. Um,
Yeah.
but
I
yeah,
bet you Toto Wolff is regretting signing up to that cost cap
oh,
agreement right now.
100%. Another thing that I want to talk about, kind of related to that, and all the big teams really, is how engineers are going to Aston Martin from every big team, not just Red Bull, Mercedes, but also some Alpine ones, some Ferrari ones, even some McLaren ones going to Aston Martin. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of people are dubbing the Aston Martin like the green Red Bull and saying that it's imitating the Red Bull. It definitely has a lot of characteristics, but it also takes characteristics from Mercedes in that they use their engine and their rear suspension. Um, you can see that the Aston Martin, in my opinion, is the collaboration of all of the big teams together in one car, making it work. And I think that it makes it really interesting to see, like where is this car better than the Red Bull? It's not, but where could it be better? I guess.
Yeah.
Versus like where is it compared to the McLaren, to the Alpine, to the Mercedes? Like what's it doing better than Mercedes right now to make it so much faster? Because I mean it's clearly faster. And what's it doing better than Mercedes or than Ferrari right now to make it so much better when it comes to cornering? Um, and I think one of the most interesting things about it is just like teams complaining about it. One person, I don't remember what podcast I was watching, but they brought up an interesting point that engineers who transfer teams shouldn't be able to work on the current era cars. And I think that would be really interesting
Mm.
because, I mean, let's take it just from the most notorious Dan Fallows, right? Because obviously we know he was one of Red Bull's most integral parts for their new car. Um, Everything that he did at Red Bull, he gets to bring over to Aston Martin. And I mean, it's his work, so it's not like he can just like say, Red Bull owns this because technically they don't. It's his. Now, whether or not he went, number for number, calculation for calculation, up in the air, but just the fact of the matter is he helped build a vast majority of the championship winning car, and now he gets to bring all of that information and all that knowledge over to another team.
Uh, I can agree with that solely because um it neutralizes sort of any risk of IP. It neutralizes the whole concept of being a green Red Bull.
Yeah.
So I can agree with that they shouldn't be allowed to work on the current version of the car.
Mm.
I think where my sort of skepticism with Aston Martin at least rises is that you got Dan Fallows, you built this big sort of you built like a solid car that's faster than two of the top teams,
Yep.
and you're hiring all these different engineers from Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, Alpine. I think who's it? David Sanchez, I think Ferrari's te- chief development officer, I think,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not sure what he did. He's one of Ferrari's top engineers. He's now on the engine market for in terms of going somewhere. So you'd imagine Aston Martin, Mercedes, McLaren will be the teams sort of bidding to get him to work for them.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's like you've built this car, you've hired all these, you've poached quite aggressively from a lot of different teams. For me, I think maybe it's just my bias, maybe it's just me not being happy with it. But like, how have you done that and maintained a budget cap
Mm-hmm.
sort of situation? Because building that car would have taken a big chunk out of your budget cap,
100%.
and and then you're hiring all these engineers aren't going to be cheap. I promise you that much.
No
F1
way.
engineers aren't. F1 engineers aren't in like just lining up like one after the other.
Yeah.
So I'd be excited. I'd be interesting to know how if they've kept it under the budget cap and they've like still done all this and kept it on the budget cap. Like props to them. I want to know who's their accountant and how he's doing it.
Yeah.
But I would not be surprised if like next year, yeah, probably
Mm-hmm.
we hear of Aston Martin, a budget cap break for Aston Martin in 2022,
Yeah.
2023.
One thing that, so somebody else brought up something interesting, kind of related to the point where, yeah, it would be cool and interesting to see, like, if you work on one team, you can't work on another for the current era cars. Understandable. But on the flip side of that, they said that that would leave a lot of people out of work because, let's say you're in that Williams team, let's say you're in that McLaren team where your car's just not working. and they decide that your services aren't needed anymore, but you're still good enough to be an F1, right? And
Yeah.
then you can't just go to another team and start working there because obviously you just worked on another team's car. Um, but like, like I think the easiest concept for this is Mercedes, right? Clearly the engineers haven't gotten it right. They have hundreds of engineers waiting. So you could just drop one, pick up another, and it's like, okay, what do I do with this guy now? Because he's clearly talented, but just not
Yeah.
for this era of car. What if,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I was like, it's really interesting to see both sides of the coin, but I don't know. It's up in the. It's also like outside of just having a large number of engineers, it's also just a really interesting problem. The same thing that I brought up last week. People just not really caring about the budget cap because they're just sending engineers elsewhere to get most of their pay. And I mean, there's nothing you can do to combat it. It's like, unless you say, hey, if you're an F1 engineer, you have to stay an F1 engineer. You can't work in anything else. But there's no way to viably
No,
like watch over
no,
that. That somebody's gonna
no,
fire
that's
you.
not possible. Yeah,
Um,
because all these teams have like so much aside from F1, right? Because Mercedes has the whole Ineos boat thing. They have the AMG1 program, their hypercar program.
yep.
Ferrari also have. I don't think Ferrari have a hypercar program, but Ferrari have their. I think they recently entered the Le Mans 24-hour Le Mans with their
They have
hypercar.
endurance racing cars, but yeah.
Yeah, for Red Bull have the Valkyrie, which is all like they're all Formula One techs. So
Yeah.
um, I don't think it's possible to just say, if you're an F1 engineer, you're an F1, you have to work in F1. I think
Yep.
it's a loophole that's going to get exploited. So you just deal with it as it goes.
Yep. Um. All right. So we're almost out of time here, but we have to get predictions. Give me your top 10 for Saudi Arabia.
This is gonna be depressing. Let me just pull up those. Let me pull up the little grid for um because I don't know the grid. So I mean, given an obvious, I'd say Max Verstappen number one, P1 for this for Sunday.
Yep.
For race, we're talking about races also, right? Fine.
Yes, race.
I'd say Max one, Checo two, uh, Lewis three. I'm
Okay.
just gonna I'm gonna hold out hope. After Fernando Alonso four, Carlos Sainz five, George sixth,
Huh.
Stroll seven, um, Valtteri eighth,
Okay.
Charles Leclerc ninth,
Mm.
and 10th. Let's make it interesting. Lando Norris.
Oh. Uh. All right. That is interesting. Um. All right.
Give me
For
your top 10.
me, I'm gonna say Sergio Perez P1, Max Verstappen
Yeah.
P2. Um.
Okay.
I think Carlos Sainz P3.
Okay.
I'm really praying he doesn't have an engine issue like Charles. Um, I'm gonna say Fernando P4, Lewis P5, Lance P6, George P7. I'm gonna say Pierre Gasly P8. Um,
Okay.
Valtteri Bottas P9, and I think I'm gonna say Esteban Ocon P10. I don't think Charles is breaking into the top 10.
Did I have him at P9? I had him at
Yeah,
P9,
you got
right?
a P9.
As I said, I could see him breaking top 10, assuming retirement race, but
It's gonna be a long race for him, 100%. The best he qualifies, in my opinion, probably behind Fernando, probably behind both the Aston Martins and maybe one of the Mercedes. So I'd say, in my opinion, he's probably qualifying P5, P6, and which means he'll be sitting in P15, P16, and making it back to that field's gonna be god near impossible. Um,
yeah.
I think this race is going to be unbelievably competitive. But before that, Claire also sent me her top 10. So let me go ahead and read those off real quick. For her, it is Checo Perez at P1, Max Verstappen P2, Carlos Sainz P3. This is like mine. Alonso P4. It's four for the same. Lewis Hamilton P5,
Damn.
which is the exact same.
Damn.
George Russell P6, Lance Stroll P7. So let's swap mine.
Yeah.
She said Valtteri Bottas P8, like you.
Okay.
Charles P9, like you, and then she said K Mag P10.
K Mag. Yeah, okay. I guess
I,
that's a fairly bold.
yeah,
Um,
I don't see the Haas making it in the top 14, honestly.
I don't see Lando Norris making it top 10. I'm just sort of like,
Spicing it
praying to
up.
God
Okay,
someone
realistically
retires.
speaking, who do you have as your P10?
Realistically,
Yeah.
if it's a regular race, no retirements, nothing, I could see Esteban Ocon P10 or even Joe P10.
Ooh, Joe P10 would be
Um,
interesting.
but with knowing Saudi Arabia and how it is, I'd say you're more likely to see
Hmm.
someone you wouldn't expect to be in P10, but somehow gets into P10.
Yeah,
So
I
I'd
mean
say
Lewis was
for now,
P10
Landon.
last year.
Yeah, that was really funny actually. He
Yeah, he
was
said
like, "What
that.
the
Do you
hell?"
get a point for this?
It shows you how long he's been competing up for.
Yeah. He's like, all right, Lewis P10. He's like, is there even a point for that? He's like, yeah, just a point. We love Bono. How many safety cars do we get this race? Virtual and actual.
I say one actual safety car,
Hmm.
full safety car, and one full safety car, one red flag,
See
and
a red flag?
one virtual. Yeah, I could see a red flag and one
Okay.
virtual safety car.
Okay. I'm gonna say one safety car. I'm gonna say three virtual safety cars, but no red flag.
No red flag. Okay.
Nope. I don't think there's gonna be another red flag. Last time there was a red flag, it's because we had uh,
Get Mick.
we had a certain Russian on the grid.
No, you had also didn't we
Well,
have a
Mick
red?
Mick
Was
was
that?
in qualifying.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, qualifying.
yeah, he just didn't get the
Okay.
race, so couldn't have a red flag during the
Yeah.
race if it's not during the race.
Yeah.
Um, and there was one more thing. Who gets the fastest lap this race?
Oof. I say this time it's gonna be top 10. I don't think Red Bull are just gonna allow someone. I think I'd say either per. I'd say actually shit. That's a good question. I'm I'm like in between Perez and Leclerc because I think Leclerc won't break the top 10, so he'll want to take the point
Yeah.
off of someone in the top 10. I'll say Leclerc. I think
Okay.
Leclerc gets.
I think it's gonna be Checo just because he's a god at street circuits. I feel like out of all the drivers, I think he's the driver that's probably the least afraid of walls. I mean, when we saw his
Yeah.
qualifying lap last year, the guy was on the limit. I mean, every wall
Oh
was millimeters, and it was amazing.
yeah.
Um, I think, in my opinion, I feel like this year he's probably gonna set the fastest lap, break the record for fastest lap in Monaco.
That's assuming he doesn't put it in the wall on
Oh,
Q3. So
100%, yeah. Um, but yeah.
it'd be really funny though if we saw him put in the wall in Q3. Given what happened last year, it'd be
Oh my
really funny.
god. And then like Checo's winning the championship, somebody's close, and then they're like, Max, you got to defend for him. Max is like, no, not after what happened in Monaco.
Hell nah.
Okay. Last question, for real this time.
Go for it.
If Sergio Perez wins this race and gets the fastest lap, and Max gets P2, that'll put Max and Checo. Checo will be in first place in the championship by 1 point. Do you think that Red Bull and like Christian Horner will uphold their word and say, we'll support whoever's the number one, whoever's in first place?
I don't, but I also think it's too early in the season for them to start using team
Yeah,
orders and stuff like that. I think they'll wait till. Let me take a look at the schedule. What the schedule looks like. Um.
while you're looking at that,
Yeah.
I think this year Checo is gonna go like I feel like there's a strong chance he'll go blow for blow with Verstappen because there's so many street circuits on the calendar this year, and I mean he's shown his prowess at street circuits. Like the guy is amazing at them. Um, and also I think he's just getting better as a driver. Given his age, the fact that he's actually getting better as a driver is amazing. And I don't
Yeah.
think the car's developed 100% towards Max anymore. Like I think like the new updates are definitely like Sergio Perez is making the best of them. He qualified, I think less than a tenth. No, it was 0.137 seconds between them. But had Max not done a second quali lap in Bahrain, I think Perez might have been on pole. So I think like Perez has the pace to be up there, and I think this year, I think he'll go like. I think they're gonna take every race win, but I think it'll be like like a 13-10 or maybe a 14-9 split between them. I think it's gonna be a lot closer than last year.
I don't think so. I think by Azerbaijan, which is like what race of the season,
I think it's
it's
fourth.
Sakir, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Azerbaijan. Fourth, Azerbaijan or Miami. I think you'll have someone. I think you'll have Christian Horner calling in team orders, and I think it'll
Mm.
be in favor of Max Verstappen. So,
Okay, so it's interesting. I really don't want to count Miami as a street circuit, but I will just for the sake of it. Um, we have four street circuits in a row this year. We have Saudi Arabia,
we do.
yeah, and then we have Melbourne, and then we have Azerbaijan, and then we have
Yeah.
Miami.
Oh yeah, Melbourne is a street circuit. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's really like there's so many tracks that I didn't consider street circuits because they don't look like street circuits from the outside. Like you could actually,
Yeah,
yeah,
and then you have Imola as well. For all intents and purposes, with the size of it, it's basically a street circuit. Taking it produces. So
yeah. So there's so many street circuits actually now. What do you think it is that makes them want to go to new street circuits rather than drive at actual circuits? Like a lot of people like, why not go to South Africa again or some other place? Like why not go back to Portugal for theirs or any other ones?
the thing is, I think it's because the money is in the city.
Yeah.
I think that's the reason you don't see Hockenheim and Nürburgring back on the calendar is because no one's willing to sponsor such a race that's like not in the city. I think the money's in the city, and I also think street circuits provide more speed, so you have the more exciting factor of it, with the exception of Monaco, of course. But you see a lot more speed, you see a lot more jeopardy involved in it. You could hit the
Yeah.
wall, whereas on a regular track like for Silverstone, you could go off in the gravel, but you'll still come
Yeah.
back onto the track. So I think there's a lot more the money and the jeopardy and the speed sort of bring more street circuits into it.
Hmm.
I personally am not a fan of street circuits.
Yeah.
Um, I don't like Miami. Uh, don't like Imola that much. I think Imola is a boring race because it
Imola
doesn't.
is like to both drive it in the game and also to watch it. It's not the most
Yeah,
spectacular thing on the planet.
yeah. I don't like Monaco. Like for the racing, I don't like Monaco. For the event,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
People call it
You
a
most
race
associate.
procession. Like it's not even a
It,
race. It's just
uh,
a procession of cars.
it is. I mean, you basically saw it last season. Like it was like the top four, and then you had Fernando Alonso's train just chugging along,
Yeah.
holding everybody up. Nobody actually changed positions aside from when Ferrari decided to, bin it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's street circuits are my favorite circuit. I'd rather go to like Mugello or like um, Portugal, Portimao.
Portimao is
You know,
amazing.
yeah, it's a fun tracks.
Yes.
Go to Malaysia. Malaysia is always a good track.
Hmm. There's a one track.
Nürburgring.
Um, they're always like, this track, if you can drive it, like you're just like an F2 driver, you're just a good driver. Um, I don't remember the name of it, but Macau. Apparently the Macau track
Malaysia.
is insane to drive, and I'm just like, I haven't seen it
Yeah.
ever, but yeah, apparently it's like if you can just make it out of Macau, then you're doing good.
No, yeah, I'd go to Malaysia. I'd go to Mugello, Portimao. I'd go to what was that one track? Shit. I had it, but I forgot.
Not
Anyways,
memorable enough.
no, I go to the Nürburgring.
Yeah.
The Nürburgring is a great place to race.
Mhm.
Hockenheim also a fun place to race.
I want to see Sochi
I don't
back
know.
on the calendar, but we probably won't see it
I
for a few
hated.
years.
I hated. Sochi was so boring. It was like
I just want to
you
see
didn't see a
Valtteri
lot.
Bottas win another race because that's where he's got most of his
Ah,
points at. So, I mean, that guy's a Sochi specialist at this point. I think that's where
yeah.
I
So,
think he is one of the most winningest drivers around Sochi.
probably,
And like
honestly.
the guy, he's like I think there are many. There's 20. I want to say 2020 or 2020 or 2019, um, where he was definitely going to qualify behind Lewis, but he gave Max a tow down the main straight to get third. Because starting from third place is better than starting from second there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm like,
Oh yeah.
this guy
I remember.
loves this
I
track.
remember 20. Yeah, they like gave Lewis some stupid two penalties, and then you had like the whole thing was off like either have to get
Mhm.
me or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Um,
yeah, I
but
remember that race.
that's all we have for you guys today. If you guys stayed till the end, let me know what your favorite street circuit is. Um, and yeah, I'm Patrick. That's Yakhub. And for Claire's sake, it's lights out, and away we go.